Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me out there? Maybe. Sawati Kap. Tan Pu Mi Giet Tuk Tan. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to a sad, but hopefully we'll have some positives out of this session on the impact of, in Southeast Asia, of the dismantling of U.S. Foreign aid. What took 65 years to build has apparently been destroyed in about 3 weeks, and that's a somber note. So let's dig into it. Thank you for coming. I'm humbled to be here with this very experienced panel. I'm Peter Dupont. I'm a development professional and a U.S. business owner, and I've spent most of the last 2 decades working across Asia on clean energy initiatives, actually about 3.5 decades. But for the last 20 years or so, I've spent a lot of time working on USAID projects in the area of clean energy. And my journey has taken me from boardrooms to rural villages, from government ministries to manufacturing facilities. And during that time, I had the privilege of serving as a USAID Senior Climate Change Advisor for Asia with my friend Craig here, who was working on wildlife. But we were in a mission here in Bangkok with 600 people or something like that, a lot of people who probably don't have much job security now. I think some of them are still there. And then, I was fired by Donald Trump in 2017. I was hoping he would tweet it, but he didn't. So my contract ended when they were deleting the word climate change out of all of the websites. So that was 8 years ago. And I set up a company after that because I wanted to be more of a doer than planning the initiatives that the U.S. has been doing. Personally, over the past 2 months, I've been quite vocal on social media about the illegal, unconstitutional, shambolic, chaotic actions that are going on, which started, you all remember, with the decision to fire most of USAID staff. They did this ruse. They basically said, oh, we're going to do a 90-day pause. And so you do a 90-day pause. We're going to review all 7,000 USAID projects, okay? First thing they did is they basically fired the top 60 people, frog marched them out of the building. So there's no one left who can actually do those reviews. It turned out they had no intention of doing that. A couple weeks later, USAID was taken by the Elon Musk stormtroopers, the Doge bags, or I just call them doggy bags. It's a travesty. It's soul-sucking. It sucks. I think when people say to me, thank you for speaking out, one thing I realize is asymmetric warfare. If you work for USAID or you work for a contractor for USAID, you can't really speak out. So I'm one level down in the food chain. My company was getting 35% of our revenue. We're a small company, like 25 people. So I can speak out, but for many others, it's harder to do. So pivoting to the sort of more important, existentially important area of humanitarian assistance and economic assistance, and what is happening in that arena. We know that this abrupt cessation of U.S. foreign aid has led to major humanitarian economic challenges, including healthcare disruptions, Rohingya refugee support, human trafficking and scam operations, including 7,000 individuals who've been rescued from forced cyber scam operations in Myanmar, independent media, and climate action. So all that's not good, but that's what's happening. So I'm an energy specialist. I don't work in this field. I'm going to learn a lot tonight, and I hope you will too. And I talked to the panelists about this. We're going to try to find some at least seeds of hope, seeds of potential ways of rethinking how to approach this area of humanitarian assistance and helping people. in this situation. So the panelist here from this side is Leon de Riedmatten. He's Executive Director of the Border Consortium. Leon's been at the forefront of supporting refugees along the Thai-Myanmar border. He brings insights into how the loss of U.S. aid is affecting some of Southeast Asia's most vulnerable communities. Next to him is Patrick Pongsathorn, who is a senior advocacy specialist at Fortify Rights. Patrick was at the UN for a number of years and joined Fortify Rights how long ago?
About 6 years ago.
6 years ago. So what he does is he works to defend the rights of marginalized populations. He'll speak about the human rights challenges that have intensified since the absence of U.S. assistance. Klaus Dieck Nielsen is directly to my right, to your left, is Co-Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. He has deep experience advocating for human rights of refugee communities and other people on the move. He'll share how these groups are grappling with the more challenges and heightened risks in the new landscape. Prima Sukmanop, who is in the middle here, is a key, she was, I just learned this, senior case officer with the Resettlement Center for IRC, International Rescue Committee. Like many in this field, tens of thousands or more, she is no longer employed to deliver the assistance that was obligated by Congress and illegally paused by an unelected billionaire. Sorry about that, Prima. She'll offer insights into how the dismantling of U.S. assistance is impacting refugee support systems. Dee Lee is the founder of Inno Community Development Organization and president-elect of the World Hepatitis Alliance. Dee is a leading voice on health advocacy, and he'll talk about critical health initiatives that are jeopardized by the funding cuts, especially around hepatitis prevention and treatment. So we're going to cover a lot of ground: human rights, refugees, health, and we'll start with Leon. Okay. So for each of the panelists, maybe it'd be good if you give a short sort of 1 minute background on sort of who you are, what you do, what your organization does, and then get into the questions. We'd like to sort of, as a way of understanding who you are and maybe also the amount of funding that's been affected. Like Leon, you were saying there's about $8 million worth of funding that was there 2 months ago and poof, is gone. Instead of just asking everyone to introduce themselves, I'll ask a question and you can work your way into it. So from your perspective, Leon, what are the most immediate and visible impacts along the border of the dismantling of U.S. assistance programs?
Good evening, everybody. As Peter said, I am the Executive Director of the Border Consortium. Maybe just an introduction, the Border Consortium have been established at the request of the Thai government 40 years ago, when the first refugees started to come from Myanmar to Thailand. At the time, it was only 10,000 people, and then the Thai government tried to find who could help them, feed them, and they found that there would be some churches who could do the work. This is how the consortium started long ago. Now, if we look at the situation of today, it was 10,000 40 years ago. Today, it's 110,000 people who are in 9 camps all along the border of Burma. And this number has increased after the coup of 1st February 2021, at the extent of 20% more people now are in the camps, even if normally they are not supposed to be there because the Thai government doesn't allow to have new arrival into the camps. But TBC cannot refuse to accept them and then have to feed them. So as you have said, our main donor for all these camps is the State Department, but not USAID, but PRM, the Bureau of People and Refugees and Migration. And PRM was supporting TBC with food and cooking oil in all these 9 camps, which means that every month it's around $1.3 million that we need in order to feed those people. But because the number has increased so much, what we can do is only maybe 65% of what is needed. Now, because of this executive order, there have been, even if there have been no formal request to TBC to stop its activities, we have not received any more money since the beginning of the year. So we have money until the end of this month. Can you believe it? So then afterwards, what will happen? So I and my colleague have to go and meet the National Security Council, the Royal Thai Army, the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and tell them, you are the ultimate responsible of this situation. What are you going to do? If we cannot feed them, what will happen? It will be a real crisis. And this is more or less where we are. So when you look at this, the possible option before, there was also one possibility was resettlement to United States, but one executive order has already stopped it. So it cannot be done. Thinking of sending those people back to Myanmar when you see the situation there, the conflict and so on, this is also impossible. So what is left? What is left apart from a beginning of an integration process into the Thai frame? And what we really request at this stage in this process is at least let these residents in the camp being able to work outside. Because if they can work outside, in 1 week, one person can get even more money than what we provide them through our normal assistance. And this, we made even a survey, and there are already some people working outside the camps, and we asked the other people, the other reasons, what do you want? 50% are ready and willing and have the skills to work outside. And outside, there are plenty of opportunities which are related to agriculture, to tourism, or, or even to having some selling shop or things like that. So it won't be too difficult, but the point is, it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow that something has to be done. It's not in 2 months and so on. So we, all in all, normally we were supposed to get 5.7 million more from PRM, and it's not yet there. But today I heard that the suspension, 90-day suspension, is over, and then the State Department apparently is ready to continue to provide this grant and funding to TBC. But anyway, it's going to be too late. And this is the first part. Can I finish with the second part?
Maybe 1 minute and then
Yeah,
we'll
1
move on.
minute and then I will end. And then TBC also works in Myanmar. We do some cross-border operation. And from USAID, we lost 1.5 million, in which means that we were normally able to provide some assistance, but mainly non-food, but governance, education, capacity building to 100,000 displaced people inside Myanmar. This is gone. And then also through the UN and through the UN system, we were also supposed to provide assistance to 60,000 displaced people who are located on the Myanmar side of the border and cannot go back to their native places because of the conflict, and on the other hand don't want to cross the border. And then the 60,000 people, the 1.4 million that we were supposed to get for them, it's gone too. So this is the situation of today. You can understand the complexity and all these uncertainties and the urgency that something has to be done.
So there could be people beginning to starve in a month. There could be people beginning to starve in a month. But
Maybe starving is not maybe yet the situation, but those people in the camps who are still considered as temporary illegal migrants after 30 years, 40 years, they will have to decide to move out. And then what will happen to them?
what's keeping the people from working now?
Because working outside the camp is prohibited by the Thai authorities.
Great, thanks. And we're going to open it up to questions once we do one round with, so keep your questions. So over next to Patrick, from the perspective of Fortify Rights, what are the main issues and impacts you're seeing related to human rights advocacy and protection in the region?
Thanks very much.
And what keeps you up at night,
What keeps me up at night?
besides too much coffee?
My daughter, yeah, my toddler, mainly keeps me up. My name is Patrick Pongsaton, as you know. I'm the Senior Advocacy Specialist at Fortify Rights. We're an independent human rights organization. We're registered in the United States, actually, and Switzerland. I don't know how much longer we'll maintain our registration in the States for, but fingers crossed. Thanks to everyone who came out tonight, and thanks to Adam and Peter for organising this. I've learned from Vice President Vance that saying thank you is extremely important, so I try my best now to say please and thank you. In terms of human rights advocacy, I think that it can't be understated the impact that these cuts have had. The role of the United States classically has been to come on the side of human rights, and has been a backstop for us in the human rights community on many, many occasions, especially dealing with highly sensitive cases. And the work of USAID has been exemplary in that regard. We work in Thailand, Myanmar, and Bangladesh in this region, and we also started working in Ukraine recently as well, but I'll stick to the countries in this region. And USAID and US foreign assistance funding totally was worth $922 million in 2023, which is the last time there was fully recorded statistics. Out of that, 168 million went towards governance support. So that includes human rights work and human rights programming. In Thailand, a large part of that governance support was focused on things like human trafficking, anti-trafficking programs. There are very large anti-trafficking programs here, a lot of it being implemented by private contractors like Winrock and others, who have now, I guess, all shut down in Thailand largely. And they've been shut down at a time when, as has been mentioned, we have literally thousands of survivors of human trafficking lining up at the border of Thailand, needing processing, needing support, needing access to protection and hopefully returning to their loved ones. And it's just the worst time to be losing US support from these programs. The impact on refugees in Thailand will obviously be discussed by other panelists, but again can't be understated. I think that it challenges the very paradigm of refugee management in Thailand to the extent that that exists. In Myanmar, USAID supported vital atrocity prevention work. So that was literally protecting people from being massacred. And they provided large-scale support for human rights defenders and organizations which documented and responded to atrocities which are regularly happening across the border. We've spoken in Fortify Rights, that is, has spoken to, for instance, criminal defense lawyers who are still working inside the courts in Myanmar defending political prisoners. And as a result of these cuts, they've had to dip into their own savings to support their clients and their clients' needs. We've also spoken to independent Myanmar media outlets who have already or are likely to have to lay off large proportions of their staff as a result of the cuts. Overall, in Myanmar, what this does is compounds the tactics of the junta, who are very cynically and horrifically literally starving communities of food, of electricity, of vital public services, to try and fight their civil war against the people and to continue their crimes against humanity. So really, Trump has put a kind of ace in the hands of the military junta in Myanmar by doing this. Finally, in Bangladesh, vital protection monitoring mechanisms which are used to monitor violence and abuse of Rohingya refugees in the camps have been put on ice as a result of these cuts. And the WFP, the World Food Programme, also recently announced that due to the funding climate, they didn't specifically point to USAID, but they said due to the difficult funding climate, they'll have to more than half the monthly food rations for the refugees, going down from $12.50 to $6 a month per person. So $6 a month to feed a person is extremely challenging. So I think I'll wrap it up there. In terms of, so that's very much like focusing on the programming, but I think in terms of advocacy, I think we've also seen, as I said, the US losing its influence on governments, including Thailand, and actions being taken as a result of those breaks being taken off, including the deportation of, I think it was 40 Uyghur recently back to China, where they face likely persecution. And so I think we're still coming to terms exactly with what this means on the advocacy side of things, but it's not good.
I'm trying to look for some good here. I was going to say the U.S. is the biggest foreign assistance donor, but there are others, and those others are playing copycat. UK is cutting its development assistance budget in half. Netherlands, other countries. So is there any donors that either you or Leon have been speaking with who are sort of waving their hands, and even from like embassy funds or something that could help out? Maybe you could each briefly talk about seeds of hope that you see.
Yeah. I have had my own experience. I went to Australia, to New Zealand, to Brussels, and to Switzerland. And I would say in Europe, because of the situation, and look at Switzerland, they have taken money from development and humanitarian assistance to put it in defense and security. This is a fact. And in UK also, we see that something similar is happening. And then thousands of other organizations are asking for the same thing. So then they will give priorities maybe to national organizations, and then Ukraine is taking almost 50% of all what is available. And then the rest, you have Middle East, and then. So Burma, Myanmar is very far in the list.
Patrick, could you comment?
Yeah, I mean, us as an organization, thankfully we weren't too hardly hit. We do take funding from the National Endowment for Democracy that had its funds kind of suspended, but that's gone through the courts now, and we just got a good news from that, that those suspensions will be lifted. But I think other donors are trying to step up, and we really thank them for that. I think individual donors, we've actually seen an uptick in our individual donations from just private citizens, so we're very, very grateful for all of that support. But it's going to be extremely difficult. The Trump administration has removed hundreds of millions of dollars from a global system. There aren't any other governments that can fill that gap. People talk about the Chinese. Obviously, the Chinese have a lot of money, but with that money would come strings. We don't know what that would mean exactly, and maybe we'll have to contend with taking Chinese money and dealing with those strings, but I don't think we're there yet.
Peter, I have to leave, so I will introduce Tim Moore, who is in charge of the director of the Thailand program, to replace me because I have an urgent other meeting.
Look, we're only 15 minutes in. You can't take the heat. Anyway, he has an understudy, so Tim, come on up. Thank you, Leon, I know you've got another meeting. Thank you for coming. I would like to say it's deeply ironic that the gentleman, if I can call him that, unelected billionaire who's received $38 billion of U.S. assistance for his companies has slashed $40 billion of U.S. foreign assistance in 3 weeks. The irony is disgusting. Sorry. Klaus. So Klaus is Klaus Dick Nielsen is with the Asia Pacific. We'll say the complete name, the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network, APRRN. And maybe you could give us a sort of a regional, well, start out by, like, what does your organization do? How did you get into this? And then what's maybe a more regional perspective on refugees and how the situation is being affected by the dismantling of U.S. assistance and the follow-on effects?
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to Adam as well for organizing this event, and to everyone who has turned up. So I am Klaus, one of the 2 co-secretary generals of the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network, also known as APRIN. So we are a network of 300 members, 200 organizations, and 100 individuals in 28 countries, working to protect and promote the human rights of refugees, stateless persons, IDPs, and other people in situations of vulnerability on the move. And we mainly do advocacy, but we also do capacity building and network strengthening. I would say that not all of our members, far from all of our members, have been affected, and our secretariat has not either, but it goes beyond that in terms of repercussions of the whole scene, which hasn't been fantastic in terms of funding for a long time. And we are in a region with 2 of the world's largest and most protected refugee situations, namely people having to flee within and from Afghanistan and Myanmar. I know this is Southeast Asia, but I'm just going to touch a little bit on other countries as well. And for a long time, we have been forgotten by the many international donors because of, as colleagues were saying before, now in Europe the money's gone to defense and so forth, but there was the Ukraine war, there was Gaza and so forth. We did a consultation with our members a few weeks ago to find out what has been the impact from where they sit, and some overall conclusions was that critical access to urgent health care was actually a concern, and some of our members have already had to close down or cut down some of their programs. But when it came to healthcare, needs for survivors of trauma and also sexual and gender-based violence, came up on top. Mental health as well has affected people a lot, given the increased desperation, confusion and fear this whole new situation causes, which is, people live already in a very precarious situation here with very weak legal frameworks and human rights frameworks and so forth. For example, we have an instance of an Afghan woman in Malaysia who was about to be resettled to the US. I know one of my colleagues will speak about that later. And 10 days before she was going to leave, she could not leave. So it's like, I would almost say back to scratch. It's very devastating for people, and there are many more than her, and some of them cannot really think ahead of what will their future be. Also, the fear is that the US shift on the whole thing on anti-refugee rhetoric and practice will make people even more vulnerable and at risk in this region where the protection net and services, protection net is quite thin. Just a couple of, Patrick already mentioned Cox's Bazar with the cutting down. The situations there is dire. In the first place, overcrowded camps and so forth, and with the funding shortfall, this is going to be even worse. There are also, issues of insecurity and so forth. Yesterday, UNICEF Bangladesh came out with a press release saying that 27%, there was a 27% surge in the number of children who have acute malnutrition and have had to seek treatment for that. And over 15% of children in the camps, which host more than 1 million Rohingya refugees, over 15% are now malnourished. This is the highest level since 2017. Did you want to talk about some of the greatest challenges as well, or is that for next round?
I just want to hear more good news.
I can.
And also a little bit regionally, like Myanmar border, inside Myanmar, Rohingya, like other areas in Southeast Asia
Sure.
where there are impacts? with
Sure.
refugees?
I mean, I do want to say there is one good thing, and that is the refugees themselves. I mean, we see that a lot, and we keep preaching that whatever solutions that anyone is involved in must include people with lived experience, and we see a lot of resilience from people who want to contribute, who want to be part of it, and as Leon said before, also want to work and contribute to the economies and societies in which they live. So that is definitely something we must not lose sight of. How to facilitate that and get that going is, of course, a more difficult question. I mentioned Malaysia before. That is certainly an issue as well. I mean, my Co-Secretary General Hafsa is in Malaysia right now. One of the things is to influence the Malaysian government, because they're the chair of ASEAN, on how to respond to refugee issues as well. I mean, the ASEAN is sort of a slow-moving thing, but there are hopes of doing things there regionally. But I think the whole issue, and now I'm going back to being negative, is that there is no coordination, no political will among the countries to work together on migration governance, which is really needed. You can't do this in silos in the countries, and I could go on and on about that. Just one more thing I would like to say is, and I would actually like to quote Hafsa, my co-SG, which goes back to what Leon said. He talked about it's tomorrow, because when we talk about longer term solutions as well, we really need to address the urgency of the now. We hear about affected staff, including people here today who have been laid off, and it's horrendous and everything else. It's a huge loss for our overall course towards ensuring the enjoyment of human rights. But we mustn't forget the urgency of the people on the ground that are directly affected by this. For example, again, going back to Malaysia, just have this from Hafsa today, two of the key organizations, again, working on health, prevention and responses to sexual and gender-based violence against refugees, have had to close down. And that means that at a time that is very challenging for refugees communities, for the reasons I said before, is going to be even more overwhelming because there is no support system in that. Yeah. One last thing I want to say is in terms of the public narratives as well that we see. While we have to work towards changes in laws, policies, and practices, we also at the same time work on public advocacy or campaigning, because in Thailand, in many other countries, in Malaysia, again, Indonesia, the sentiment against non-citizen, in particular Rohingya, has gone. I mean, we talk about hate speech, disinformation, misinformation, and so forth, and it's quite astounding. We hear stories about people being paid to post things on Facebook and so forth against Rohingya and things like that. So we really need to address that as well, and there are some different initiatives to counter that negative narrative on migration. And here I'll stop. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Klaus. So as I'm going to introduce, I will introduce Prima Sukmanop, who formerly worked with the International Refugee Center, IRC. But I sort of have to say, as a U.S. citizen who was sort of brought up with some sense of ethics, although I broke a lot of rules and did a lot of bad shit, I think most Americans are taught basic good manners, treat your neighbor with respect, a lot of sort of good religious virtues in any religion, and it's absolutely mortifying as an American, and many of us in this room, and millions of people across the U.S. who are protesting now, that the linchpin of this system, which has existed and grown for 65 years, and it's not like it's growing exponentially in this like kudzu, you have to cut it. It's serving a purpose, and maybe it could be reformed, but that the system is apparently weak enough that U.S. Basically dismantling USAID and U.S. foreign assistance can have so many impacts, follow-on impacts, 65 years and 3 or 4 weeks, as opposed to 65 years and let's say, let's fix this. Let's have more self-reliance. And that leads into Prima and her remarks, but Prima and I were talking about, how do you fix this? More self-reliance. I think you, Patrick, talked about, crowdfunding and ways like that. This cannot happen again. And I just, hate for the fact that the country that I was born in and which I'm mostly quite proud of, is, basically the way I look at it, we set our social capital, made a bonfire of our social capital and creating a huge humanitarian disaster and geopolitical vacuum. Enough of my pontificating. Prima, working with IRC and with your experience, what are you seeing, and what do you see as the greatest challenges? And maybe you could give us a few seeds of hope.
Sure, thank you so much. I'll start by maybe sharing a little bit about what happened to my work and the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, and then I'll touch upon possible solutions later on. So, yeah, hello, yeah. All right, so my name is Prima Sukmanop, and I was most recently a senior casework officer at the Resettlement Support Center, RSC Asia. So we have offices in Thailand, Malaysia, and Bangladesh. And in Asia, the RSC is operated by the International Rescue Committee located in Bangkok, Thailand. So as part of the casework team, I was part of the field team. So I traveled to refugee camps along the Thai-Myanmar border to interview applicants so that they could be processed for resettlement in the US and also regionally. So we would travel to Indonesia, Malaysia, and Bangladesh as well to process these cases. So most recently, there was an executive order called Realigning the United States Refugee Admissions Program, and that executive order indefinitely suspended the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. So as a result of that, all of my colleagues from the Resettlement Office, myself included, are currently unemployed, and this is quite a drastic. I would consider it a catastrophic, even humanitarian disruption. In Thailand, we see a lot of legal limbo, a lot of people being placed in legal limbo. We have about 90,000 refugees within camps waiting for resettlement, and within urban areas, including in detention centers, we have in Thailand about 5,000 individuals. And the same case for Malaysia and Indonesia, a large urban population, large urban refugees who are not able to access long-term legal pathways within their country of asylum. And as some of my co-panelists have mentioned, we also have over 900,000 individuals in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, who are also waiting with desperation for a legal solution. So within the IRC, I think we could sort of categorize the impact in humanitarian assistance and also resettlement. Humanitarian assistance would address refugees' needs while they are still waiting in their country of asylum. So the impact would affect protection services, legal services, child protection, women empowerment, and also family planning and other livelihood programs. So that's we see the impact of these repercussions now. And in addition to that, as I've mentioned, there are no legal pathways for refugees to legally integrate into the societies of Southeast Asia. A large population, which I think within the region it exceeds 1 million individuals. They're relying mostly on third country resettlement. And although the US RRP has been suspended, I think there are still other resettlement countries, other programs that are still ongoing. But it's important to note that the US RRP is the largest refugee resettlement program in the world. So, and it has it has options for people who may not have been considered in other resettlement countries. So yeah, there's a lot of confusion on what's going to happen, and a lot of people will be placed in legal limbo at the moment. Now to have a little bit of a maybe...
Sorry, could I just
Yeah.
ask, I'd like you to continue. Sorry, I'd like you to continue, but where besides the U.S. are these refugees being resettled? Like are there a lot of other countries, or like the vast majority to the U.S.?
Well, as I mentioned, the U.S. has the largest refugee resettlement program in the world, but other players in the region, I believe, would include Australia and Canada and a few other Scandinavian countries in like very limited quotas. Right. Okay, so maybe I'll move on to something a bit more positive on what could possibly be solutions, or how we can move forward, how Thailand can move forward with this disruption that's currently happening. So I think we can explain this with a little case study. So the IRC has hospitals in 7 out of 9 refugee camps in Thailand. And all of those hospitals have been closed as a result of the 90-day pause. So right now, some programs are able to resume with limitations. But what happened during those 90 days, I think, were quite interesting. We see some camp residents, some refugees who reside in refugee camps themselves. Some of them may volunteer in the medical team. Some of them maybe have some kind of medical experience when they were back in their country of origin. A number of people took initiatives to build a field hospital within these camps to provide basic medical care to other people like them. And more recently, I think the Thai Ministry of Public Health has also made commitments, and they have addressed the concerns that has happened along the Thai-Myanmar border. They mentioned how we will need to improve border hospitals. They also mentioned that they might consider expanding the health insurance scheme for migrants, possibly to include camp residents. So I think these are some very good examples, something I would consider a glimpse of hope in this very dark age for humanitarian sector at the moment. Because right now, this whole situation, this disruption reflects how unstable the humanitarian sector is, and it's mostly because we rely so much on foreign aid. But foreign aid is something that's so politicized and often very unstable. So then a lesson we could take from this is possibly to find something more local, find more self-reliant options, find something that we can maintain locally and be the one to decide our own fate, I would say. Because this then again highlights the role of NGOs to begin with. NGOs don't exist to completely replace states. They exist only to complement states in areas that they need better improvement in. So we shouldn't, the sector should not rely only on NGOs. There should be other actors, other people involved in the process. And I think this is something we should discuss more about. Thank you.
Thank you, Prema. One thing that's a bit surprising to me is, I mean, you're right that being so reliant, it's in retrospect, who would think that this would all be torn down in 3 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever. But it is clearly a weakness to be so reliant on foreign assistance. That said, the amounts of money we're talking about are relatively small, and they're quite distributed. And I'll give you an example. So my business partner lives in Melbourne. He and his wife have had a career moving here or there. He's trailing her, she's trailing him. She is the lead expert in workplace rehabilitation technologies and systems for WHO internationally, and she's out of a job. Well, of course, Trump pulled out of the WHO, but the USAID funding has ripple effects in so many places where it's not necessarily even the primary funder, and that's just a huge weakness. Thank you, Prima. And now, last but not least, Dee Lee of Inno Community Development Organization and also President-elect of the World Hepatitis Alliance. So we're shifting to health. I don't know if you're going to cover all health, probably not, but it's good to have this perspective as well. And maybe you could just talk a little bit about the type of work you do with your organization that you work for and also with the Alliance. And then, what are the main issues you see happening on the ground in terms of health in Southeast Asia caused by the foreign assistance dismantling?
Thank you. So in terms of health, I think the most direct impact onto our health is when we turn on the TV, read the news, turn on the cell phone. Trump and Elon Musk are everywhere. This is the most affected factor to our health. So every day when I turn on the cell phone, it's like, oh my God, here we go again. Another news. This is the most direct health. So bear in mind, today we're talking about something totally big globally, regionally, but turn off our cell phone, read some more cat video instead of Trump and Elon Musk. To introduce myself and my organization, tiny little bit. So Inno is an on-the-ground community-based NPO based in China, India, and ASEAN countries. We have programs including grievance mechanism that is linked to modern slavery and also the fighting hepatitis discrimination in the workplace. In terms of World Hepatitis Alliance, WHA is an international non-governmental organization advocating and awareness raising for elimination goal for the viral hepatitis. The organization represents 350 members from 92 countries around the world. So we hold a relationship status quo in WHO and UN. So I'm using the viral hepatitis as an example for the impacts on the public health sector. The new U.S. administration has taken a reckoning ball to the health-related service and research both at home and abroad to shut down everything, including CDC, FDA, and NIH in terms of HIV/AIDS, TB, also the STI and hepatitis at the same time. So the backslide effort to improve it's a backslide on the effort to improve the inclusivity that's still being unpacked. So what are the implication for viral hepatitis elimination, for which progress has already stalled? A nutshell for the viral hepatitis, there are still 300 million people living with hepatitis, mainly on B and C. The most affected areas is West Pacific regions and the Southeast region as well, with more than 2/3 of people of the population with the viral hepatitis, stay in this area.
Could I just clarify, 2/3 of the people globally who have viral hepatitis live in Southeast Asia?
And West Pacific regions.
And West Pacific.
China mainly.
Okay, thank you.
The efforts to scale up the testing and Hep B and Hep C are the most immediate risks. USAID distributes half of U.S. foreign aid and its shuttering down had abrupt effects all over the world, including HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, TB, malaria projects been disrupted through the staff losses with uncertainty, closures of HIV clinics, and reduction in testing in other settings, including community and STIs clinics, will no doubt have a knock-on effect of viral hepatitis because there has been services already integrated and introduced in many other areas. So the means to prevent the infection are also likely to suffer. USAID is a major donor to Gavi, which only launched its hepatitis B birth dose vaccination program in June 2024. Speculation that UK may follow the cut over the Gavi program, which is totally alarming. Harm reduction surface as well. The people inject drugs who are being disrupted inevitably, increasing the risk of transmission of Hep B and Hep C. Also, last but not least, anti-DEI orders could result in increased stigma and render engagement with the key at-risk population with more challenging. Even though that nowadays with internet, with everything else, sharing information is like a tipping finger-clicking moment. But as my colleague Meg Doherty, the director of the Global HIV, Hepatitis, and STI programs at the WHO, told me in person that the efforts are being made now to coordinate sharing the vital supply for the medicine between countries. When we say stop, it's not US stop things from going out and coming in. It's the total halting process for globally. So some facts is that I know that you guys are the expert on information, on the fact, with the numbers and the stories, but these are some facts we collected from the community. By showing you guys the facts, some context, we have to show that the U.S. supports the bilateral efforts directly funding the implementation of global health activities in the partner countries. But multilateral health institutions, including the international organization and the pool support for the donors, are more important for the sector, which is including the service delivery. So fact number one, there's a cliff show up all of a sudden on a downhill slope. Take a look at Myanmar. The country received the largest number of the funding from USAID. In 2014, it ranked number 23. Now, in 2023, it's number 43 among the countries receiving the funding from USAID. Cutting the money from 228 million to 87 million. So this shutdown is all of a sudden to keep up with the trend. And also the second thing is the research funding. Funny thing is the research funding from the US all over the world is not being paused because these are the leverage for the big money. You have the drugs, you have the money, you have more bargaining power to get more minerals, oils, anything that Trump wants. The third thing is the service delivery, capacity building are totally terminated for the small NGOs. What I learned from my community, there are already 20 organizations got shut themselves down. It's not because of the 90 days. They could not wait for another 90 days. There's nothing for them to do. So the only thing they can do is shut themselves down, see what they can do later. And the fourth thing is, the other countries will follow. What I just mentioned, the UK is one of the good examples. What about the others? What I know is some European countries are shutting down. From the news, from the foreign support on public health all over the world. Yeah, that's pretty much the narrative on the global health by using the viral hepatitis as an example.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not a health expert, but I read the news like everybody here, and this whole shambolic way of implementing policy is like, oh, we'll have an exception for HIV. And I talked to someone who is an HIV provider. They run a program, and it has been restored so they can provide assistance to HIV vaccines and continue trials. But there's no one at USAID to make the payments, right? So it's just appalling. You guys here have, I'm sure, a lot of experience. You're in the region. Some of you may be working in this area, so I'd like to hear from you. You may have experiences you want to share. You may have ideas. I was just talking to my friend Craig about ways that we could brainstorm about preserving some of the sort of human capital who work in the sort of environment, sort of green, clean energy, sustainable landscape sector. So we need to be rethinking things, and it would be much better if we had, let's think, have 2 years and rethink how we do foreign assistance instead of 3 weeks. Anybody have questions or ideas or comments they'd like to share? There's a mic right here. The gentleman in pink.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Very interesting presentations. My name's Sebastian Berger. I'm the Southeast Asia Bureau Chief for the International News Agency, AFP. I have 2 questions. Of the 9 camps on the border, is there any one of them that is particularly vulnerable to impacts from this for whatever reason, because of it has activities there are more there's more US funding for any one of the activities, or because there's a greater influx there? Just, is one of the camps particularly vulnerable? And second question, I was very interested by Leon's point about allowing migrants to work would have a very strong mitigating impact. Given the absence of alternative funding, are there any other regulatory, or I don't want to say cost-free, but any other initiatives or changes or measures that could be taken that don't cost a significant amount of money but could have an impact? Thanks.
So we have our Leon understudy here, Tim.
I've never been called a Leon understudy.
All right. No, how about if we call you the backup?
No,
you're the backup band.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and great to see this very full room. Obviously, there's high interest in what's happening, and it's very motivational and heartening to see you all here tonight. And thanks very much for these 3 questions. The first question is there one of the 9 camps on the border, and Leon mentioned the population, which is nearly 110,000 at present in those 9 camps, increasing by 27% since the military coup in February 2021. So is one camp more vulnerable than others because of the changes to US government support and funding? The quick answer to that is no. The impacts that are imminent because of changes to funding and support are evenly distributed, for what that's worth, across the 9 camps in terms of the Foreign Assistance Executive Order. Where there is a disproportionate impact is the other major order that affects our refugee communities, and that's the one in terms of the refugee, it's not acceptance, what is it? But the refugee program. Admissions, thank you, Patrick. Yeah, the admissions program. So our most active and accessible, durable solution up until the 24th of January this year was a phase 2 US resettlement program with potential to resettle at least 4,000 people a year. And even though that's not a large number in the whole scheme of things, it was a very active program, and there were people who were scheduled for resettlement, who now probably will never be resettled, certainly not under that program. And why I mention some camps impacted in particular is because the camps have been processed in series. For those of you who know the camps, so Bandonyang in Sangkhlaburi being the first one, and Tamhin in Ratchaburi, Umpium Mai in Tak province, third in line. So these are the ones who are really feeling it, and there's been great anguish, as you'd expect, amongst those individuals who have been instantly impacted because they won't be resettled to the States, as it seems. And these are people, of course, who have been in camps for decades with really no other option for a life outside of these very restrictive, closed environments, resource-constrained environments. I can talk forever, so you better close me down, but I do want to say something here. We have the pleasure to serve and work with and through incredibly dynamic refugee communities. Many of you will have had contact with the camps and the refugees. They are amazing people. They are very well organised. There are really effective and strong democratically elected leaders and governance structures in all the camps, all refugee-led. With a sense of pride, it's been our honour to support those structures and great leaders along the way. To be honest, and this is a real advocacy point, you could pull down those fences and those camps will continue to function. The main thing is that people need a means of income, and as Leon said, a small shift in opportunity to work would be an absolute game changer, and we need that shift, well, yes, tomorrow, before the end of the month, in fact. Otherwise, we're going to have huge impacts related to funding shortages and a decrease in the ability to provide even the most basic humanitarian assistance in the camps, in particular food. So it's not a big ask. In fact, to be honest, even though it's counter to current policy, you realise that the policy developed for the camps is already 4 decades old. It's almost been immutable. It's totally unfit for purpose. All those who work in the camps, including the Thai authorities themselves, know that. There's been great leeway to actually pragmatically reapply or to reinterpret policy at local level. And indeed, for many years, there have been significant numbers who have worked in the camps, but also outside the camps, with a great need. Leon mentioned that even with food, the exact figure is actually we supply against the sphere standards, for those who know those. We only supply 67% of the current food needs in the camps overall. There's a very sophisticated and effective equitable distribution process in place to make sure that the most vulnerable are really looked after, and those with the agency to look after some of their own needs get on and do it, and they do. Food security is incredibly strong in the camps. We monitor it. This has been a practice all along, and actually what we need right now, urgently, is a small increase in the ability of refugees to work. And I'll reiterate something that Leon said. In a household, generally 5 people, one person working 1 extra week a month will cover what we supply that household for a month's food. 1 person, 1 week for 5 people for their food for the month.
So what are the barriers to changing that stupid rule?
Yeah, well, it's a win-win-win, obviously, for refugee independence, and we need to really work actively on creating that independence for local communities and business people and farmers and others who absolutely need these workers. So it's a win for Thai economy, particularly in local areas. It's a win for the Thai government because we're just about to face, I think, a significant security problem in the camps if people don't get a sufficient basic assistance or don't have other means. So what over the years, and still applies, I think, in obstructing that shift in policy, has been, first of all, the fear of a pull factor. And you understand why that might be. You don't want to create a situation whereby there's a tidal wave of people coming across the border. You've got to understand that from the government perspective. And the other is holding strong with a, let's say, country-to-country administrative relationship and not wanting to upset that. I've been very diplomatic in the way I've said that.
Great, thanks. And I didn't introduce you properly. I introduced you as Leon's understudy, but you're much more than that. The Thailand, Tim Moore, Thailand Program Director of TBC. Other questions, comments, sharing? Yes. Can you walk up to the mic because people will not be able to hear you? Sorry. You can just use this.
Sure. Okay. Here, I'll go first. I'll warm up the mic. Hi, everyone. Megan Sullivan, former DCOP, current or maybe I should say former independent consultant with USAID as well. Before I ask my question or my call to action, maybe I can do a quick interactive poll. Can I just get a quick raise of hands for anybody who's ever written a case study or been part of writing a case study for reporting? So, okay, a lot of folks out here. So the call to action that I'd like, or the suggestion that I'd like to bring to this room is, we know how to write case studies. We know how to put a face on the good that we do. I think it's now time to put a face on the harm that the Trump administration is doing and that Musk is doing. I think these kinds of stories, and I'd like to call for leaders especially to encourage and to meet with independent journalists that can put a face on what is happening because of these cuts. I think that's going to really speak to U.S. individuals, to donors, and give the politicians in the U.S. fire to fight with. So I know, especially with the gag order in place, this is a really challenging time. A lot of organizations are very fearful of putting their neck out there, but if we don't fight, if we don't put a face on this, then those faces are going to fade into the background of the economic crisis that we are now facing in the US and around the world. So I would really encourage, break out those old case studies, reach out to those individuals that you interviewed and helped, and see what has the impact been, and don't let that knowledge that we've gathered be lost. So thank you.
And how can we disseminate them? Can you help us? Can we
Yes.
send them to you?
We can say, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of different organizations. I'm tapped in through my work with, for those of you guys who know the AIR Network, journalism, organizations across Southeast Asia. I think that could be one thing. I think we're all reeling from this blow that we've really taken to the solar plexus, but hopefully as we start to get back on our feet, again, I volunteer myself, but if others want to reach out to me to talk about how we can disseminate that, how we can put it in the hands of people in the US as a US citizen, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
My name is David Feingold. I'm from Ophidian. Also for 15 years, I was in charge of all Mekong programs on HIV/AIDS and human trafficking for UNESCO. Very fortunately, I am not dependent on USAID funding, but I would like to very strongly echo exactly what the lady before me said. Because one of the problems with the way this is presented is it always starts off, of course there is a need for reform. Well, this isn't reform. It's like saying, of course there are better ways to do surgery, but you don't walk in with a samurai sword. And what people can relate to, in my other life I do documentary films for television. So I've done things for the BBC and PBS, a number of other things. People can relate to individual stories. In other words, when people understand that the decisions that are being made are actually killing people, people are going to die because of these choices. And some people won't care. But I think there's a lot of people in America that will care. And I think this case study idea is an excellent one, and we should do everything we can to contribute to it. Just one other thing, Peter, then I'll shut up. Those people and organizations who are, quote, afraid to stick your neck out, well, let's look at all the people who didn't stick their neck out, who now are missing their heads. In other words, if you don't get it, that it ain't a 90-day pause, and that this ain't coming back unless we do something, I guarantee you, you will pull your neck in and they'll still chop it off.
Quick before you leave, thank you. Yes, are you going to make a documentary on this? If I raise some money for you, will you make one?
Yes. Actually.
The story needs to be told. Megan's point was great, and so was yours. And yeah, you have considerable skills at telling stories, so thank you.
Hello, my name is Wessel Huisjes. I'm originally from Holland. I've been in the area for about 35 years, and I was involved with the Lao people returning to Laos in the early 90s. It was supposed to be a voluntarily return program between the Thai government, the Lao government, and the UNHCR, but not everybody wanted to go home. They were still very much afraid of the communist Lao government, but they had to go, and we had a project, we helped them. At the moment, we are one of the suppliers to the Border Consortium. We provide food for the nutritional program. That's what my company does. And I've always said, when the day comes that the refugees go home, my company, my work will stop, and I will be a very happy man. Even though I love my work, we're here to solve, we're here to solve problems, and we want these people to be in a good place and be home and be safe. Now, talking about that, I was wondering if maybe Tim, or if the urgency is tomorrow and nobody does anything, and the Thai government says, because of the reason mentioned, we can't do anything here, what will happen? Will people actually will those camps empty out? There's 3 million Burmese workers in Thailand. Yeah? We're now speaking about 100,000. That's a very small amount compared to the big picture. Today I was talking to a Burmese group that some workers, I don't know where they came from. I don't know if they're legal or illegal, but they're going to build a building for me. And they're here, and they're supporting the economy. And this room is filled with a lot of people. There's not too many Thai. This is Thailand's problem, right? And we're the foreigners. And we're talking about foreign aid and the unsustainability of it all. The Karen and all the people, as far as I've known them, I've worked in Myanmar before, are very good, very hands-on people. They'll find a way for themselves, right? So what do you think will happen if none of us can do anything? They're running out of food, cooking oil. The fences around the camps are kind of half open. What might happen?
Yes, please, Tim, and I don't know, Patrick or anyone else who has a comment.
I mean, I think that could be a scenario. I mean, Tim, you would know better than me, but I guess that could be a scenario as the Thai government kind of just sits on their hands and the conditions in the camp get worse and worse. Then maybe they roll in the army, and then maybe they force them across. I don't know whether they would go to those lengths or not, but it's a pretty nightmarish scenario. And just back onto the couple of questions we had before that, I think both excellent points, and I think that's one thing that we need to also do. I think there's a tendency to say, well, we're in the middle of a tornado right now, and we just need to batten down the hatches and stay quiet for 4 years. But that's the wrong response to authoritarianism. We know that as a human rights organization, and I think what we do need to do, as the question Megan and the other gentleman said, is we need to record this, we need to report on this, we need to understand how authoritarian regimes are rolling out this kind of pressure on civil society, on the most vulnerable, so that if this happens again, 8 years, 12 years from now, we'll have better responses than we currently have. Tim.
Yeah, thanks very much, Wessel, for the questions. We'll have a chat later because there are things to talk about too. First of all, there is a lot happening. And even preceding the shift in the administration in the US, there'd been some really positive changes in our ability to, not just our ability, but in an appetite to address and progress work for refugees. We're able to talk about local integration now, which has just been completely off the table for pretty much all the time we've been working with our populations. And these are really positive changes. There are parliamentary and sub-parliamentary committees of wonderful people coming together to advise and to try to push policy in the right direction. The other thing that has always worked in our favour is our very strong relationships with government, and for us it's particularly within the Ministry of Interior, centrally, provincially, at district level and at camp level. We've always worked very closely with, we answer to, Ministry of Interior, and we work very closely with them, and almost always we've been able to find pragmatic solutions to problems, particularly at camp level. And I think I alluded to the ability and the leeway and even the sort of official provision that at local level that our government counterparts are given to, let's say, make local policy or reinterpret the central policy. Budging central policy is really tough, but we've always found solutions on the ground. And I'm confident that we'll do that. Our conversation, one of the issues we've dealt with here, is just massive and sudden uncertainty. And you would love to have, 12 months to be doing this planning, and we haven't got 12 months. And even today, we got information that is totally instrumental in how we steer the next 2 weeks, and that's almost a daily occurrence. So this is new, and it's very sudden. But the discussions we're having with the Thais tell us that they totally understand the situation. They totally understand what needs to happen. It's slightly more difficult to make that happen, but I do believe that we'll get there. Where we'll fall down is if we get there in 2 months' time rather than 2 weeks. But I'm still confident that we will make that immediate shift and then work on the longer term, higher level policy changes that we absolutely need. One of the positives from this is that something that we've been trying to achieve, a major advocacy point for many years has been work for refugees, legal work for refugees. And we have tried in many ways, some sitting on this panel, some in this room, to shift the needle on that agenda and that policy. And we failed, despite incredible efforts. It's not by design, but what we have this year is greater urgency, motivation and weight to progress and to, with the foundation of the work we've done many years, to actually make the change. And my mantra is, this is the year of change. This is our opportunity. And I'd say even just the next few months is going to be absolutely crucial.
Thanks. Tim, great point. And before the next question, could you expand a little bit on the dynamic between, like you mentioned earlier, you want to avoid the pull effect. So if you legally allow refugees to work, how do you balance that with, it could be a magnet for people to sort of go there? I mean, how would that work and how would you mitigate that?
Right, well, it's not for us to do and it's not our concern. But it's obviously the concern of government that is often voiced and we understand. So I can see it through their eyes. And we only get wins when we can find common ground and to understand shared perspectives. So that's why I mentioned that. And there are ways to mitigate that. Actually, what happens in the camps is that there are periodic registrations of people in camp. The people are not supposed to move in and out of camp, but they do. The fences are porous. And so there are people in camp who are not officially registered by the Thai government or by UNHCR. And the last registration process occurred in 2019-20. There was a head count by MOI. And that might be an acceptable part of the population to work with at the moment. Our advocacy would be for everyone in camp. A refugee is a refugee in camp, deserving of all the protections and rights that a refugee should be afforded. But there are ways to say, okay, we'll accept this population, and we'll they might close the gate again, as it were. Now, it may not officially close the gate, but you could work with that population. So that's one way that the government might proceed. And to ostensibly limit the pull factor. To be honest, it's not a pull factor; it's a push factor, And people who come across the border make their decisions around whether they require the protection of the camps, which has been already pointed out. Actually, there are about 7 million migrant workers in Thailand now. Most of them are from Myanmar. So I think that was a conservative estimate, the one that was mentioned, of 3 million. Sorry, Wessel, I think it's more than that. So there are really the majority of people from Myanmar are not in camps and are working in Thailand, and they themselves are not a pull factor.
Let's get to the next question, sir.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Howe from Relief Singapore. There are some NGOs in Singapore that are trying to establish humanitarian access to channel aid into Myanmar for those who are vulnerable, civilians. I was just wondering if the panelists would be able to shed some light on two questions that I have. First one is, how effective is the work of the NUG's Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management? And what are the pros and cons with working with that ministry? And second question is, does anybody know of any emerging movement to coordinate humanitarian aid across the country, particularly among CSOs? Yep, thanks.
Great. Who wants to take that? I see Patrick and Tim taking notes. Prima, do you have any? No? Okay. Maybe Tim and then Patrick?
Well, we operate in the southeast, so not at the whole of the country. In the southeast, from the report I got today from one of the local CSOs, we know that there were 1.1 million people displaced just in the southeast of Myanmar. In the last 12 months, we were able to reach about 350,000 of those, and when I say we, it's through an extensive network of CSOs who do incredible work deep into difficult terrain. It doesn't matter about who's administering those particular areas. So we already have the mechanism in place. And so there are many donors, and some that might surprise you, who come to us and our extensive network that's been built over many years to get the job done, at least in the southeast. So please send us your money. We will accept it, and we will use it most effectively for the southeast. But and the rest of the nation I can't speak for. You asked about the NUG. There's been an important shadow government. There's been the residual of the NLD. They have a presence and voice, sometimes in quarters unexpected, in other parts of the world, and I think some of their advocacy might be, their advocacy and their efforts outside of Myanmar actually might be having greater influence than within Myanmar. We've had connections with the NUG. We don't work directly with the NUG to get the job done. Maybe that's enough said.
I could just come in on that. One point of correction for Tim, so I wouldn't normally correct you, but the NUG is the government of Myanmar. It's the legitimate government of Myanmar. They were democratically elected. They aren't the shadow government. They are the only government of Myanmar that we currently have. In terms of their effectiveness and efficacy and coordination with others, obviously, that probably leaves a lot to be desired, and I can't really speak to that. But in terms of their legitimacy to represent the people of Myanmar and for humanitarian aid to be directed through the NUG, they obviously are far more legitimate in that regard than the junta, who are starving people to death, their people. So, and in terms of coordination, I think also there's a multiplarity of actors in Myanmar. The NUG is an important one, but also the ethnic resistance organizations and their kind of civilian wings as well play a really, really important role. And I think there's a lot of coordination going on with them and between them that's worth looking into. But obviously the country is at war, and so coordinating civil society in the country in a time when they're at war and when the junta is suppressing all civil society is extremely difficult.
And thank you for the correction, Patrick. You're absolutely right. Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks. I think we have one or two more questions. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Matt Peets. For another month, I'm the Chief of Party of the Diversity and Inclusion Scholarship Program in Burma. Thanks very much. Peter, you mentioned that when Trump fired you in 2017, you were sad he didn't tweet about you. Well, Elon tweeted about us, and Trump has mentioned us twice on television. So if that was my 15 minutes of fame, I want my money back.
Yeah, it probably wasn't a good thing to hope for. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that happened to you.
Well, it could be a good fundraising tool. We've actually, my organization, Institute of International Education, has had a successful fundraising effort on the back of that attention, but not nearly enough to support the 281 students who are now stranded in 5 countries across Southeast Asia, 1 semester in to either a 2-year or 4-year program that the United States government promised them they would get their degree from. I just want to call a little attention to, there's a lot of short-term impact that the panel has spoken very eloquently about. There's a long-term impact and a soft power impact to all of this as well. A lot of recipients of similar scholarships in the 90s in Myanmar went on to play significant roles in the democratic opening in 2011, 2012, which made a lot of the work that all of us have done in Myanmar possible. And these students were chosen because of their leadership potential, their activism in the democracy movement, which means they're more likely to be targeted if they have to go back to Myanmar, not just forcibly conscripted, but probably arrested or worse. And so the impacts will just, it's such a shot in the foot of our soft power and our image in the region. On solutions, obviously I don't know, but a couple of things that we've been thinking about. For those with US reach or contacts, there are a lot of local fundraising groups like Kiwanis and Shriners and Rotary who are often good people in small towns looking for something worthwhile to put their money into if this could be called to their attention. It's one of the targets of our stories that have been talked about, including sending those stories directly to members of Congress and senators, not just to the media. But also, there's so much happening in the courts. And of course, whatever happens in the courts, we all have to be skeptical about. It's the Department of Justice that implements whatever the courts decide. But still, I don't want it to be lost on everybody that the last couple of days have been really interesting. And 2 days ago, there was a finding that even though the government has the right to shut down any contract that it has signed for any reason, still that reason cannot be arbitrary and capricious. So that's why the projects that were closed before the apparent review have some standing to be reopened. Projects closed between January 20th and February 13th. So there's also been a finding that DOG is subject to Freedom of Information Act requests. So I really suggest everybody submit a Freedom of Information Act request to ask what was the decision on which your project was terminated, and use that as an argument perhaps that it might have been arbitrary and capricious in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Great intervention. Thanks for sharing that. Another question, sir?
Yeah, sure.
You just happen to be walking by?
No. I'm trying to find somebody to hold my beer. Hold on. I wore this shirt today for a reason. It says, peace. It's got, Elon Musk and, Kim Jong-il and Donald Trump on it. And there is a mercurial aspect to this presidency that we've seen before, and that can't come as a surprise to anybody on the panel. To anybody who is sitting there debating the effects of funding cuts, did you not see, and this is a bit of a devil's advocate question, did you not see this coming? And because of the fact that, when you see things like defunding to Myanmar, you're going to see a Chinese pipeline coming through that goes past the Strait of Malacca, and obviously funding will return because Trump's going to have a bird in his ear from someone. But what are you going to do when the funding comes back on? What's the mechanism that you're going to implement across the board that's going to ensure that the funding is used more properly and stays in case that you have this mercurial temperament happen again and you lose funding once more? Is that because he could turn the funding back on it with like a switch of a light, and once it does, what are you going to do to retain as much of that, or maybe recoup the funding to try to generate more money? And is that something that's on the table? Because panicking and saying, oh my God, like we've lost this funding is one thing, but like once it comes back, because I think it will, because once he realizes how strategically important Southeast Asia is as it rises, it's one of the most fastest developing digital economies in the world. What will happen when Trump realizes he needs to use that soft power? What will you do to retain that fund in case he decides to cut it again? Also, Nick Hibley, formerly the Bogota Post and Los Angeles Daily Journal, currently looking for a job, so hey.
Thank you. Dee, you want to take that?
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a great question. And also good luck to your job hunting. The one thing that I'm pretty sure that is a fundamental fact that is not being played out as a priority when we advocate our assertion over the internet or maybe globally is that Trump administration, it's not just about Donald Trump, that includes Elon Musk, Mark Rubio, and all the big boys on the board. These people, their lives has been cursed from the beginning of their birth. And our hatred is their fuel to get them grow stronger and bigger. So I'm not saying we should stop hating, stop proposing all the good case study, and saying bad things over the X about Elon Musk and Donald Trump and the big boys team. But what my it's not suggestion is, do you think we should keep hating but start digging?
I don't think it's about hating. I think it's about, what I'm talking about is taking the money that, when you have investment, reinvesting it so that you don't have these funding shortages when they come.
Yeah, so that's why I'm going to keep up with that. So there were two things I wanted to put it on the table. Is one, enjoy the new normal. We think, what is being played out now for the USAID funding shutting down is exactly what happened in January 1st, 2017 in China, when foreign NGO law were introduced into the country. Now, 85% of civil society got wiped out from our land. I'm not saying it was only because of the land. There were multiple other reasons. But still, there are another 15% of the civil organizations are doing pretty well, doing what they can, enjoy the frugality, split 1 cent into two to make a living by helping more people. Enjoy the new normal. We got multiple, superpower to come up to say, shut down, no more, pause, stop, you evil, you stupid. Keep cursing each other. So enjoy the new normal. So take a look at the area and the country where people are not having enough of funding. For example, hepatitis. By giving an example, these are the population of hepatitis globally. What about the people living with HIV/AIDS? 10%. But in terms of the funding, these are the funding HIV/AIDS sector has been enjoying. The funding for hepatitis, a drop of that. It's 200 times more than hepatitis with the funding in HIV/AIDS. So, but we're doing what we can to maintain our pathway to eliminating hepatitis, viral hepatitis. So there's the second thing I want to say about is, we should find some other innovative way. For example, blockchain, DeSci. We as a community, we have now convening probably 100,000 pounds to put in the pool to find the new HPV treatment, because nobody is helping us to find the treatment of HPV. I'm a HPV carrier, but I have to find the cure by myself. But I have 300 million people help me to find it. Enjoy using blockchain and DeSci to see what's going on. Or maybe there are some other good things on the market. We couldn't sustain. We have to diversify our funding resources. Otherwise, at the end of the day, we are the one who suffer. We should start to do something naively, and also really to think about something stupid in the past, because no one would witness what's going on with Trump administration shutting down the USAID.
Well, I used to cover the venture capital ecosystem in Bogota, one of the fastest rising ecosystems in Latin America, and that's actually an interesting point. What are you doing to make are you reaching out to private investors and startups in that community? And because Bangkok is one of the most vibrant, Singapore and Bangkok are the two most vibrant startup communities, especially for health, for women's health. MedTech for women, Singapore is the fastest growing, and Malaysia are the two fastest growing markets in the world. Are you doing anything to reach out to them?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. Prima talked about changing your business model, being more locally oriented. You're talking about finding other ways of funding it. I just make the sort of basic point that I agree with you. However, it's entirely unconstitutional and illegal what he's doing. So he may say he's going to, start and stop and start and stop, but he eventually, can't just get away with that forever. So not discounting your point, I'm just talking about the blatant illegality, the role that Congress is not playing, because they're the ones who.
Not up for debate. I agree with you
Yeah.
entirely.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. And I actually had a question, Patrick, sort of related to that, about crowdfunding as a vehicle, and sort of Dee's point. There's a lot of people who want to help, and crowdfunding is it's more than just. There's someone you can give on an aggregator website, and that, it will sort of go to different agencies like yours that are working. Maybe you could just talk about that, and I didn't mean to interrupt if you had another comment related to this question.
No, just on that. I mean, I think you had a very good point. Shouldn't we have seen this coming? But your idea that Trump will reinstate this funding, I think, is a little naive, because this is part of an ideological campaign, and you could see that in the wording of the executive order, which put a freeze on US foreign assistance. It said, the aid industry serves to destabilize world peace by promoting ideas in foreign countries that are directly inverse to harmonious and stable relations internal to and among countries. Thank you. This isn't one of Trump's, first term kind of wake up and see what's playing on Fox News and jump on that agenda. This is a well thought out, calculated right-wing attack on Project 2025, the liberal democratic order and the international rule of law. This isn't going to come back anytime soon. And with the likes of the UK government, the Netherlands and Sweden following suit, cynically cutting their aid budgets in half, in the case of the UK, we're seeing an authoritarian turn on many fronts. And as much as we would love to do impact investing and crowdfunding, it's not going to fill that, $45 billion hole in the humanitarian ecosystem that's left by the exit of USAID. So obviously these things are great, and we have had very generous support from individuals donating $10, $20, $50, $100 in some instances, but it's not going to fill. For us, it's great. We're a small organization of around 25, so please do support smaller organizations, because we can maybe do more with your smaller donations. But in terms of the UN system, in terms of big organizations, in terms of crises like Myanmar, like the Rohingya refugees, like what's happening in Ukraine, I don't see venture capitalists stepping up.
Yeah. I'd like to point out also that USAID is audited regularly, every year, every other year. It's been audited up the wazoo. And I've never seen, the point about FOIA is good. I like that, right? FOIA request. Was that you, David? Or maybe it was Megan. But I'd like to see Doge audited, and shut down, frankly. I think we've taken up a lot of your time. You're welcome to talk individually to the panelists. Maybe I'd like to give them a chance for some parting thoughts. It can be either sort of a takeaway message you want people to remember, or a sprout of hope, as you wish. And I'll start with, from this side, Klaus.
Yep, thank you very much. Lots of food for thoughts. I would just like to highlight two things, and in terms of everything we're dealing with, in particular on refugees and migrants, we need to continue to have a multi-stakeholder approach. We need to get a lot more people on board, including UN agencies, which hasn't been talked so much about tonight, because they also have a big role to play in addressing these issues. And then I would also go back to the socio-economic inclusion of refugees, which Tim talked a lot about. Of course, the problem is that the right to work is non-existent in international refugee law. I mean, the problem also here in this region is that refugees do not exist. I mean, someone in Thailand is actually an undocumented migrant, so with no rights or whatever. However, there are, and that's my third point, I think we need to be also better at promoting our good examples, because in all this there are glimmers of hopes and some good examples somewhere. For example, in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, there has been a project with UNHCR and Uniqlo on livelihood opportunities with, I think, 1,000 Rohingya women, so they can make their own livelihoods within the camps. And little things like that can be escalated and sort of replicated in other areas as well. But again, like getting other actors in, and I don't think the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank has been mentioned tonight, but that's also institutions that we need to get on board. So a whole risk, we cannot do this on our own. Civil society needs to be better at getting sort of like think outside the box and getting other actors on board. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Klaus. Prima?
Yeah, I think I would just want to re-emphasize my point earlier about how the humanitarian sector will, especially in the global south, we still will always have to rely on foreign aid, on international cooperation. But as a result of this freeze, we'll have to find ways to diversify sources of funding. And besides that, we should also try to strengthen mechanisms that are available locally and regionally. For example, in Thailand, although there is no resettlement pathway to the US anymore, there currently are legal protection mechanisms for refugees, urban refugees still. For example, the national screening mechanism that grants non-refoulement protection to refugees in urban areas. Although like these mechanisms are available, there are rooms for improvement. So perhaps we could consider advocating for improvements of these locally available mechanisms to be more in line with international standards, so that in the long run, states in this region will be able to function more independently from foreign aid. Thank you.
Thank you. And is someone applauding? Okay. No, thank you. Okay. We interrupt this program for another question that just came in the door. Sir.
Sorry, it's not a question. I'm a member of the board of the FCCT, and I'd like to thank you for filling the room, because we're always very pleased. We don't get funding from anybody, so we need your support. Join us if you can. You haven't mentioned this evening the impact of these cuts on media in the region, particularly in Burma. Organizations like the Irrawaddy rely on funding. There's a lot of other ones. But the reason I'm actually standing here is to say that if you're interested in the topic of Trump, we have a program coming up next week, Backlash, Donald Trump and the Remaking of America. It will be given by a former, the author of the book is a former president of the club, Nirmal Ghosh, and he'll be in conversation with Keith Richburg, who is a member of the Washington Post editorial board, been part of that newspaper for 30 years and was a foreign editor. These are great programs. Please come and support us. This one will help you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for, thank you for hosting this event. It's very generous of you. So on to Dee, parting thoughts, pearls of wisdom, sprouts of hope.
I dare not to wrap up this wonderful conversation. So there isn't any wrapping up message, but I do have two important takeaways for me for tonight. One is that when I see the vibe and feel the vibe in the room, I need to talk to myself that if I wanted to give up just because of the short of funding, there's no one who would take my place instead to help with the people who are in need of the support that we're supposed to give them. So never lose hope. The second thing is, thank you. The second thing is, I know the old world had just died. So screw the old world, start your own revolution. Thank you.
Tough one to follow, Patrick. You want to? We can have Tim go and then come back to you.
No, it's okay. I can't really add much to that. But I think, look, I think that, as I said, we need to not sit this fight out. We need to record all of the deaths that have already happened as a result of Trump's actions, and that will happen. All of the kids who can't go to school, all of the people who can't receive medical assistance, all of the people who die of avoidable diseases as a result of these decisions that are taken by these horrible men in Washington. We need to be very clear-minded about that, and we need to record everything for posterity, and so that we have better responses next time, as I said. And I think also we need to rethink the way that we look at humanitarian crises. And I think Tim and others on the panel have spoken to this, especially in the case of Thailand. Giving people their basic human rights generally doesn't cost very much at all. I mean, in the case of Thailand, I think it would save the Thai government money and effort, and you know, I think that TBC would happily go out of business if the refugees were able to work. And I think we need to think in those regards to more and more humanitarian crises that unfortunately we have to face.
Thank you.
We don't have to imagine hope. We've got a long history of very strong relationships and networks with conflict affected and displaced communities on the Thai-Myanmar border, our populations of concern. They are amazingly resilient. They have managed many challenges over the decades. What we're facing at the moment is an incredible jolt. It does impact people immediately, especially in terms of their basic needs, but we together have incredible strength, and I am completely confident we will pull through this. We have to be clever to pull a win out of this, and some of that's repositioning support and strengthening independence of displaced people. But I'm very confident that we'll do it, because that's what we've done for so many years, and the structures are strong, and that's our foundation and our rock.
So just a housekeeping note, a number of people were asking if this was being simulcast. The answer is no, but it's been recorded. And I believe with the help of FCCT, we may be able to make this available. Anyway, we're trying. Sam, who introduced us, is on it. And once again, thank you to the panelists, and let's give them a big round of applause.